With Denali's ability to detect the loyalty of people towards Jack, she wasn't worried that Celine would actually reveal the information that she was giving her. As a precaution, she had already made sure not to mention things like they had already found who it was behind the incident and so on. After all, although Celine might actually not betray Jack, who could guarantee that she couldn't talk to one of her friends about it? And once the friend knew that Jack already knew who it was that had sent an assassin, maybe that friend was actually amongst the spies that were sent to keep a tab on Jack's location. Since the first assassination attempt failed, who could say that there would be no second attempt? Now that the other party knew that Jack was strong, they would send someone who was stronger. But, although Denali believed that Jack could deal with the assassins, it would be too annoying once the flies start bugging him. They couldn't kill him, but they would waste a lot of his time that he would have to spend in dealing with them. Have you found who it was that sent the assassin? Could it be Collins? Celine asked again. She had thought things through. During the morning hours and part of the afternoon, she had been together with Jack, and Collins was trying to pursue her. Since he could resort to her *ping her just to make sure that she became his woman, she thought that it would be possible for him to actually try eliminating Jack, as he could be considered as a rival. Not really. He's not the one. But as for who it was, I actually can't tell you unless boss gives me permission to. Denali shook her head in response. Collins and Brenda were two completely unrelated people. In fact, Collins' status was far higher than Brenda's. So, if he was going to hire assassins, he would definitely look for someone with great combat power as compared to Viper. Seeing that Denali had no intention of telling her more, Celine decided not to ask. Still, she was curious about Denali. So, she went ahead and chatted with her, trying to know her. Although Denali had said that she was Jack's assistant, who said that she couldn't actually become Jack's woman. Considering that she was with Jack even late at night, she had the biggest chance of actually winning Jack over. Thinking of this, she suddenly regretted not informing Jack about her feelings. Now that she had missed that opportunity, she decided that she would have to look for another one. She couldn't let another person beat her to it. After getting back to her room, she found that Wendy and Angie were there. They were anxious from their expressions, and they seemed ready to leave the room. When they saw Celine coming in, they were relieved. Thank goodness you were okay. What were you doing outside at this time of the night? And you even left your phone here. Angie began complaining. Well, something happened, and it wasn't pleasant at all. Celine shook her head as she thought of her experience tonight. What happened? Wendy asked. Celine wanted to explain what had happened, but was beaten to it by a question posed by Wendy. What are you doing here? This question was meant for Denali, who had come in with Celine. The two girls were concerned about Celine that they hadn't noticed her when Denali entered the room. It was only now that Wendy noticed her. And of course, she could still remember her as she had seen Denali behind Jack back in Venture City. Angie was also surprised to see Denali. She wondered what she was doing here. She couldn't connect it to Celine coming with her. Oh, that's Denali. She's Jack's personal assistant. She was the one that beat up some guys to protect me. Celine introduced. Denali, these two are my best friends and sisters, Wendy and Angie. Celine said as she pointed at the two girls. I have seen her before in Venture City. So it turns out that she is his assistant.
No wonder.
Both Angie and Wendy could finally understand why she was present in the same suite as Jack back then. A suite in a 5-star hotel had several rooms. So, it wasn't necessarily true that the two of them had actually spent a night in the same room. You guys know each other? Celine asked. Yes and no. We have only seen her back in Venture City. Angry said. What were you implying by she was the one that beat up some guys to protect me phrase before? Wendy asked. Celine went ahead to explain what had happened back at the playground. As for why she had gone to the park at night, she simply used the previous excuse. She needed to get some fresh air. The two girls were completely infuriated when they heard about what had happened. They really wanted to rush to the playground and beat Collins up. In the end, when they heard that Jack was there dealing with him, they calmed down a little. At this moment, even Angie, who had a bad impression of Jack, finally saw him in a different light. What's more, they felt grateful towards him for saving Celine from the incident. They also thanked Denali. And just like Celine, they no longer treated her as a stranger. As the girls discussed their things, Jack, on the other hand, was just beginning to deal with the scumbag and his lackeys. He looked at the guys that were still playing dead on the ground and snorted loudly. Do you think you can play dead with me? You only had your hands broken. If you don't want to lose your other 3 arms, better get off the ground at this instance. When they heard Jack's words, none of them doubted that he would actually do what he had just said. Instead, they got onto their feet as fast as they could. Their rapid movements made their hands that were broken to twist, causing them immense pain. Even so, none of them dared to make any loud sound for the fear of what would happen to them once they annoyed Jack. Although there were several young masters that had the worst pain tolerance, when they witnessed Colin's 3rd arm being broken and heard his screams, none of them dared to scream for the fear of facing the same fate. Seeing that everyone was on his feet, Jack spoke. Although it's true that you guys were only doing things according to another person's will, you cannot be forgiven. You all know what was going to happen when you held her down. Your hands have been broken because you dared to lay your hands on her. If, and I repeat if, something happened to her, believe me when I say that I would have made sure that you all die a cruel death. Facing Jack's cold and indifferent eyes plus his words, the group of youths shivered in fright. At this time, they were all soaked in cold sweat. None of them believed that they could beat Jack when they were at their peak, not to mention now that they didn't have hands. A person that could easily destroy such a huge door, that was someone that they dared not to face. And thinking of the time that they had the intention of beating him up, they couldn't help but thank Wendy in their hearts. Had Wendy not stopped them from attacking Jack, they would have really suffered a lot. Now, as compensation for the psychological trauma that you guys caused her, I want you all to make sure that you submit 50% of your family wealth to the Gravy family. Otherwise, I will make sure that your families go bankrupt. Jack continued. Jack's words immediately made the young masters frown. Even though they were afraid of Jack, they couldn't accept what he had just said. 50% of their family's assets? Not to mention 10%. Even 1% wasn't something that they could hand over. I'm sorry, but I can't do that. My parents will kill me if I ask for 50% of the family wealth. One of the youths pieced together all the courage in his heart and said these words. The other young masters nodded as if to confirm that whatever that guy had said was true for them as well. Oh, is that so? I don't care how you guys are going to do it, or if you can't do it. You better try to find a way to submit the 50% as compensation. This is me being lenient to you. Not to mention 50%. I might as well take all of your family's properties and hand them over. Jack sneered as he replied. Before the youths could say another word, Jack waved his hand and said, You can leave now. You have 1 month. If a month goes by and you haven't taken action yet, I'll make sure to pay you a visit. He could remember each of their faces. With his sharp memory, he could remember them as clear as day. So, as long as he asked Wendy and the other 2 girls, he would be able to get their information. Seeing that Jack was serious, the youths dragged their wounded bodies out of the playground. There, they met the guards who had come to see what was going on. But no matter how they tried questioning the youths on what was going on, the youths simply pointed at the playground with their chins and said no word. Although they were clearly badly injured, they didn't dare to accept the help of the guards. As long as a guard dared to approach them, they ran away. And knowing that the cause of all of this was present in the playground, the guards gave up on them and headed towards the playground's entrance. They were dumbfounded when they saw the broken double door. Swallowing hard, they looked at each other before entering. The moment that they stepped into the playground, they heard the sound of a person screaming. The scream was so loud in that they were forced to close their ears using their hands. They hesitated no longer and hurriedly looked at the direction of the scream. There, they saw a young man on the floor screaming while holding his crotch. On the other hand, there was another young man who was standing there, looking at him. The guards hurried there. They were supposed to take care of the security of everyone here in the resort. So, seeing one of the people that was supposed to be protected by them being attacked, they couldn't let this continue. When Jack saw them arriving, he gave them a cold smile and said, You have arrived just on time. I have just woken up this idiot. When the guards heard him, they were confused. They wondered what he was trying to imply. And upon seeing their confused gazes, Jack simply continued smiling before going ahead to kick Collins, who was still rolling on the floor while screaming. Shut the hell up. You are so noisy. If you don't stop screaming, I will break your other limbs. When Collins heard this, he tried to stifle his screams. He was already in severe pain of having his male genital parts being kicked. Now, he didn't dare to imagine the pain of having all the limbs on his body being broken. "Young man, do you know where you are right now? This is Adventure Recreation Resort. This is not a place for you to act tyrannical." One of the guards shouted as he pointed his baton at Jack. Jack looked at him coldly and said, "I don't think this concerns you, right? This is between me and him. You can wait at the side for your own turn." Jack's words caused the 5 guards that had showed up to frown. They obviously couldn't accept the fact that a little brat was talking to them in such a manner. What's more, he's clearly in the wrong and he dared to be arrogant. Maybe they had to teach him a lesson first. Just as they were about to charge at Jack, they heard a commotion coming from the entrance. Then, a group of almost 20 people came in. In front of them was a man wearing a suit and a pair of glasses. He was clearly an official staff of the resort. "What's going on here?" the man asked as he looked at the mess in the place. The door of the playground had been broken, and now there was someone who was rolling on the ground not far from them. "Boss, we came here when we heard a loud sound and screams. When we arrived, we found a few young men with broken arms coming out of the playground. The door of the playground was broken, and when we asked the young men what happened, they dared not to speak and simply pointed here in the playground. Then, when we came in, we found this young man here. I suspect that he's the one behind all this mess. He not only broke the door, he also broke the arms of the young men. As for the one rolling on the floor, he should have been hit in the crotch area." One of the guards went ahead and explained. They could only think that Jack was the one that had broken the door. As for the means that he used to break the door, that was no longer important for now. He would simply have to pay for the damage that he had caused. The guy with glasses frowned when he heard this. He observed Jack for a moment before looking at Collins on the ground. He took a step forward and spoke to Jack. "Young man, you should know that violence is not allowed in the premises of the Adventure Recreation Resort. So, you will have to come with us to the security department so that we can deal with the damage that you have caused here." Jack looked at him and said, "I had originally stated that I wanted to deal with this idiot before coming back to you guys, but it seems that you are so eager for me to deal with you. So, I will satisfy your wishes." The moment that he finished speaking, he looked at the guards behind the guy in the suit and asked, "Who are those that are supposed to patrol the park and the playground area?" Seeing that Jack had completely ignored what he had just said, the guy with glasses had his expression turning cold. "Who do you think you are to question how the guards work? You are not an official of our resort. You are now a criminal that has already broken the law by causing damage to the resort's property and have attacked the guests here. So, you will have to come with us." As soon as he finished saying these words, he turned towards the guards behind him and said, "Bring him down, then carry him to the security department office." All this while, Jack was observing the guards. He looked at them for a while before his gaze landed on one of them. This guy actually had a few beads of sweat on his forehead. Although it is true that it was summer, this guy had come with the other guards. But amongst them all, he was the only one who was sweating. Additionally, he seemed nervous and from time to time, he sneaked glances at Collins. Jack could immediately tell that there was a kind of relationship between the two of them. So, he completely ignored the guards who were heading his way to subdue him. He pointed out that guard and said, "I think you should know what is going on here. Do you mind explaining to me what happened with the guards that was supposed to be patrolling in this area?" The moment that Jack spoke, the guy with glasses looked at the direction in which Jack was pointing. He looked at the familiar guard, and it was true that he was the one that was supposed to be in charge of the security in this part of the resort. And looking at the expression on his face, he could tell that there was something that was going on. But even so, there was no way that he was going to accept a person who wasn't related to the security department to point out at the flaws of the guards. "Whatever it is that you are trying to say, you will say it after you reach the security department office," the man said. Immediately after that, he looked at the guards who were still standing and reprimanded. "What are you still waiting for? I told you to grab that criminal." But before they could move, Jack spoke again. "Do you know that the scumbag below here was just about to *P someone?" Jack's words made the atmosphere that was originally somber to immediately turn even heavier. "What are you talking about?" the guy with glasses asked. He was clearly confused about what was going on. Even he himself was questioning why the guards that was supposed to be in this area were not present when the incident occurred. And although he would have liked to subdue Jack first, the issue concerning something as sensitive as our *P was something that he had to take care of immediately. If a word got out that such an incident occurred in their resort, moreover during his shift, things would get extremely ugly. Not only would the reputation of the resort be damaged, but even he himself would be punished. Why don't you ask that guy where he was and whether he knows the guy down here? Jack looked at the guard that he had pointed earlier and said with a smile, "Is what he is saying true?" The guy with glasses asked the guard. It was true that this guard was in charge of the security team that was supposed to take care of patrolling this part of the resort. For Jack to be able to pinpoint him, added to the nervous expression that the guard was trying to hide, he could already tell that there was a great possibility that what Jack was saying was true. "Stop spouting nonsense. I clearly don't know him at all. As for the area here, we had heard a commotion on the other side of the park. So, we headed there to take a look. We only knew that something happened here when we came back," the guy replied. Jack had to say that this guy was so good at making stories. In any case, since he was also involved, Jack had to deal with him. He was just about to speak when suddenly, Collins, who was on the floor, shouted, "What the F***CK are you saying, you imbecile? Now that I'm in trouble you are trying to say that you don't know me? I will F***King make sure that you pay for this. Didn't I send you $50,000 so that you can switch off the lights at the park and make sure that the playground is open? Now you actually want to get the money and not take responsibility when the risk occurs." Collins was undoubtedly furious. Not only had he been crippled, now even a nobody was trying to say that they didn't make a deal. Since he couldn't vent his anger on Jack, he could as well use this guy to do that. "You are the imbecile. If you are caught, how's that my responsibility? We agreed that I would clear the area for you. As for the other things, you had to deal with them yourself. Now you are caught. You want to die with me?" The guard wasn't to be left behind as he retorted angrily. This time, since he realized that there was no way that he could get out of this as Collins had actually exposed the truth, he might as well shout at the stupid young master. "If you can't even do things properly, how am I the one to blame? I did everything on my part well. Now that you are caught, how's that my problem? You cleared the area? What area did you F***King clear? Ain't this guy a person that was supposed to not be here? How is he F***King present here? You two clearly know each other. And I never allowed anyone to come to this area. So, I don't know if you told him to come here in advance or something. That's clearly a problem on your part." The guard didn't back down. Collins was left speechless for a moment before he retorted again. "How can that be my problem? Even if a person heard my plan, you were supposed to make sure that nobody was here. What were you clearing if you couldn't even make sure that someone that was hiding here was taken care of? What's more, it wasn't just one person. There were two F***King people here." The guard was also given his turn to be speechless. All the same, the two were not willing to give up on blaming each other. Seeing this scene, the guy with glasses on was stunned. He looked at the guard that was supposed to be in charge of this area and shouted angrily, "What the hell are you doing here? Are you a guard or a hooligan? You are cooperating in making sure that our customers are harassed." The guard looked at him and retorted, "How can you say that I'm a hooligan? I was clearly serving one of our customers. In the end, he gave me a tip of $50,000 for my good work." None of them could believe how shameless this guy could actually be. He could change the crime to a responsibility. What's more stunning was his ability to shift the blame to others. Serving customers? Serving customers, your head? Does someone like him deserve to be called a customer here? That's your accomplice in crime. Glasses shouted. His breathing had already gotten irregular due to the anger. He couldn't believe that he had actually had such a subordinate all along. If he's a hooligan, then the other 7 or 8 are not. After all, I was serving almost 10 customers. If I dared to go against the customer's wishes, were you going not to punish me? You would obviously care nonetheless and say that the customers have to be given the priority. The guard continued. Glasses, priority in harassing other customers? You are clearly out of your mind. Guard, there were more customers on one side. I favored the side that profits the resort the most. Losing a single customer to retain 10 is a good deal. Glasses, You want to retain the 10 customers and chase away hundreds by ruining the reputation of the resort? Looking at the two sides that were arguing non-stop, Jack got impatient. Since they were busy, he too decided to get busy. He took his phone and sent a text to Denali. Take care of the footage. And immediately after he sent the text, he deleted it from the sent messages. He had asked Denali to take care of the footage. Collins and his goons had completely forgotten that there were actually cameras here. It was just that nobody was observing them at this time. Nobody had expected that there would be an incident in this part of the resort. Furthermore, the playground was already closed. So, there was no way that there was supposed to be a person here. When he was done, he looked at Collins, who seemed to be in a daze as he looked at the two who were still arguing. Jack squatted next to him before he snapped his fingers in front of his face. The snap of the fingers immediately brought Collins to the reality. It was also at this moment that he remembered that he was in pain and began rolling on the floor. Seeing this, Jack decided that he had to get this done as fast as he could. He still has to deal with the issue with Brenda before looking into the matter concerning his mother through his second uncle. Clap, clap. Jack's clapping attracted the attention of the two and the other guards. Seeing that they were all looking at him, Jack spoke. Look at your behavior. You are speaking too much with a partner in crime instead of detaining him and calling the police over. Huh. Glasses was confused for a moment before remembering something. He looked at the guards who were still standing there, not sure on what they were supposed to do. Oh, I'm a senior and I have subordinates. He muttered loudly. Ignoring the strange gazes that he received, Glasses said, grab the 3 criminals and take them to the security department before calling the police to come over and take them away. 3 criminals? Weren't there supposed to be 2? The guards questioned themselves. Seeing the gazes that were filled with confusion looking at him, Glasses frowned again. But thinking about what he had just said added with Jack's cold gaze on him, Glasses quickly corrected himself. Ahem. I meant the 2 criminals. The guards took action quickly this time and took away Collins, who was on the ground. The other guard tried resisting, but he was no match for the almost a dozen guards. They easily beat him up with the batons and subdued him before carrying him away like a log of wood. Can you come with us so that we can wait for the police to come and take care of them, Case? Glasses looked at Jack and asked politely. Just look at the footage first. If there's a problem with it, you can come and look for me. I still have other things to do for now. So, I'm off. Jack shook his head and left. Glasses looked blankly at the direction that Jack had left for a moment before he followed the guards back to the security department. After getting back to the room, he found that Denali was still busy with the laptop. Additionally, there were 3 girls present in the room. They were clearly waiting for him to come back. Jack, you are back? Celine got onto her feet when she saw that Jack had returned. The others also got onto their feet to welcome him. Yeah. That guy has been taken by the security department of the resort. The police should be having a visitor tonight, Jack stated before he took a seat on one of the sofas. Wendy and Angie thanked Jack for helping Celine. Then, the girls and Jack chatted for a few minutes, asking Jack about the details of what had happened. Jack didn't hide from them and told them what had actually happened there. After that, the girls decided that they would give the police a statement on what had happened. Although it was true that Colin's family was bigger than theirs, it was also true that it couldn't compare with the 3 of them as long as they took action together. Since they had decided, Jack saw no reason to stop them. He was clearly not done punishing Collins. If his family was the pillar that he was relying on to bully others, Jack would as well make sure that it fell completely. After a while, Jack asked the girls to go and sleep. After all, it was already midnight. They had been busy during the day, and it wasn't good that they stayed awake all this time. After they left, Jack looked at Denali and asked, Have you taken care of the footage? Yes, master. I have completely edited the footage and removed the parts that show your face. I have filled the blanks with the scenes that show your back. Denali nodded and responded. Jack nodded in satisfaction. This was one of the good things that he liked about Denali. She could understand his meaning fast. Well, that was other than Celine's incident. Now, Denali focused on the previous matter that was handling the issue concerning Brenda. Jack instructed her to find all the information about those that Marion had spoken to before. Although he would have wanted her to investigate about Marion and Brenda's communication information, as well as the way that they spent their money during this year and the past one, he still remembered that Denali was also a human and she had to rest. So, after she found all the data on Marion, Jack asked her to rest and continue doing things the following day. After all, although it was true that she could stay awake through the night due to her current strength, he thought that it wasn't worth it. It was good enough to sleep late and wake up early. Other than that, there was no way that Jack was going to allow it. The following morning, the news about the playground area being sealed was spread to all those present in the resort facilities. There were still 2 other playgrounds, so the children could still play. Now that the mood for the vacation had already been ruined by the chain of incidents that had happened the previous day, Jack and the girls decided to leave. The girls told the other girls that were in the group about what had happened the previous night. After that, Celine, Wendy, Angie and Jack went to the Star Hospital to pay Jonathan a visit. Seeing them, Jonathan smiled and asked, "You guys missed me already?" Now, Jonathan only needed to rest before he would be back to the previous condition before the attack. His recovery speed was amazing that it even surprised Jack. In any case, Jonathan hadn't suffered grievous wounds. It was just that the poison in his body had reduced the speed of blood clotting. So, he ended up losing a lot of blood from the wounds, and that was why he fainted. Otherwise, he would have been okay. "Who's missing you?" Jack snorted in response. As for the girls, they clearly betrayed him. "Yes, we missed you, Jonathan." "Jack? Aren't we a team?" Jack couldn't help but ask himself that question. On the other hand, Jonathan gave Jack a smile when he saw his darkened face. Seeing that Jonathan was getting something to make fun of him, Jack simply turned his head to the side and snorted again. The girls giggled when they saw this scene. All the same, the group chatted for a few minutes before Jack said that they were leaving Volant City. "You can come and stay with me till you recover. After that, you can go back to doing your business, lest your enemies come charging at me, thinking that I'm you," Jack offered. Jonathan thought for a while before agreeing to the offer. If Jack could deal with Spider, then it was true that he could take care of him. What's more, with Jack present, it was more likely that his enemies would go after him, giving him, Jonathan, a break. Jonathan managed to convince the doctor to release him. As for the matter of the police, Jonathan's subordinates handled it. After they got out of the hospital, they went back to the resort before they took the Eurocopter back to Inchoate City. The group managed to arrive back in Inchoate City before noon. After they got there, Jack had Jonathan select a room in the Prince Mansion just like how Gabriel did. Denali also picked a room in the same mansion. Once everything was done, Denali and Jack continued investigating. Since they were doing things from scratch, it would take them some time. On the other hand, Jack called Ayush and Tracy, informing them that they had to use the company's connections to suppress Colin's family. As a security company, it had come into contact with a lot of people. Furthermore, there were many that were willing to curry favor with Good Vision Security Limited. So, these people would be more than willing to suppress or destroy a small family for them. Jack had decided to make sure that Colin's family went down. According to the information that he had received from the girls, Jack knew that this wasn't the first time that Collins did something like this. It was said that he usually used his family's influence to completely suppress the other small families. In the end, even if he forced himself onto some girls, their families could do nothing to him as he was protected. Jack then asked why the girls were in the same group with him. In the end, the girls said that it wasn't them who had invited him. It was he who had joined them. With his family background, they didn't dare to chase him away. Furthermore, the girls had never expected that he would actually make a move on one of them. This was totally something that they hadn't calculated in their list of possibilities, considering that they thought that he would be afraid to cause a conflict between their families. Just like that, 3 days went by. The group only stayed in Inchoate City. Jonathan had finally recovered, and the wounds that he had suffered had already turned into scabs. In just a week, the wounds would disappear to leave behind scars. As for the information, Jack had managed to find a lot of information about Marion and Brenda. For some strange reason, he found that there was a communication between them and his second uncle. And from the looks of it, this was the interaction that had happened on the same year that his mother passed away. Seeing this, Jack had investigated the hospital that he had taken his mother to. There, he found the information about the doctor that had attended to his mother. They looked into his account and found that he actually received a good amount of money from Marion. Linking the date that he received the money and the date that Jack had taken his mother to the hospital, there was only a difference of one day. He received the money a day before Jack and his mother went to the hospital. Jack immediately frowned when he received the information about this. He asked Jonathan to arrange for the doctor to be kidnapped and brought to Inchoate City. Using the group that he had, Jonathan managed to have the doctor easily captured, and he was sent into the desolate warehouse where the Jerk Brothers gang had made their base. Alongside that $30 million that he had received from Jerk Brother had also offered the warehouse as a base for the 100 people that had defected to Jack's side. Since Jack had given a chance, Jerk Brother had decided to curry favor with him. At first, Jack thought that he would not use this warehouse. In the end, he never expected that he would actually kidnap a person. Jack took the Bentley Continental GT and drove towards the warehouse. He still had to do the questioning himself. Although Denali would have managed all of this, Jack thought that since this was related to his mother, he had to take care of it by himself. Not long after, they arrived at the warehouse. He found that the group that he had taken were keeping watch over the doctor to make sure that nothing happened. When they saw him arriving, they went ahead and greeted him. Jack had no intention of wasting his time with them. Instead, he asked them to bring him to where they had kept that doctor. Looking at the doctor who was sitting on the couch that he had seated on during the time that he had been kidnapped together with Celine, Jack's lips twitched. He now wondered if the gang had no other place to keep the hostages. In any case, Jack came and sat in front of the doctor. Upon seeing his arrival, the doctor began speaking. "Do you know who I am? I am a doctor. If the police know that you have kidnapped me, you will end up in jail." In response to his words, Jack smiled and asked, "Mr. Doctor, do you perhaps remember me?" The doctor, who was still wearing his white coat, looked at Jack. He tried scrutinizing him, trying to think if he had ever met him before. But no matter how hard he tried to remember, he couldn't remember anything about Jack. "Oh, looks like your memory isn't that good. Perhaps the name Alfonso family can remind you of something?" Jack asked. "Alfonso family? You are from the Alfonso family? What has the Alfonso family have to do with me? I'm not cooperating with the Alfonso family, and neither have I offended you, right?" The doctor frowned as he looked at Jack. Hee, Jack chuckled before shaking his head. "Are you sure about that? About 4 years ago, did you not have a little deal with someone from the Alfonso family? More so, it was Marion. And if I'm not wrong, you got $30,000 transferred into your account." The moment that Jack talked about 4 years ago, the expression on the doctor's face shifted. It was also at this moment that he finally remembered Jack's silver hair and blue eyes. Back then, Jack was young, and he wasn't like how he was now. He had his body transformed after he obtained the professional combat ability. Furthermore, it had been a few years already and Jack had already began maturing. So, the doctor failed to recognize him. Back then, he remembered that he had met Marion, one of the ladies of the Alfonso family. She had given him $30,000 so that he could tell the mother and son that there was nothing wrong with the woman's body. At that time, although he was skeptical about the situation, he still agreed. It was a woman and a young boy who had no background at all. So, he had made arrangements in the hospital and that, the moment that Jack and his mother arrived in the hospital, they were directed to him. Then, since he wasn't going to treat the lady, he didn't even waste his time testing her. He had simply taken the blood sample before disposing it off. After waiting for a period of time, he forged results and gave it to them, telling them that the hospital couldn't find anything wrong with the lady's body. He had gotten an impression of the two at that time, due to their unique silver hair and blue eyes. Furthermore, they truly had good appearance. But as time went by, he forgot about them completely and had never had another deal with a person from the Alfonso family. He had thought that it was nothing big. He didn't poison the lady. He simply decided not to actually take action in treating her. She could as well go to another hospital to confirm. So, he had thought that although he had gone against his code as a doctor, he told himself that he hadn't harmed her. Now that he was reminded of the scene, and he could see that Jack actually knew about the deal, he was frightened. But, thinking that he was one of the best doctors in the biggest hospital in Crystal City, he relaxed. "So you are the one? Anyway, you can't blame me for not treating your mother. You guys could have simply gone to another hospital and done the checkup? The doctor spoke nonchalantly as he leaned his back on the coach. Do you know that she actually died in the end because of your actions? Jack's expression turned cold as he said these words. She died? Anyway, it doesn't concern me. I have seen many people dying. So, the death of your mother doesn't have anything to do with me, and I don't care whether she died or she's alive. The doctor yawned as he spoke. It was clear that he didn't care about Jack at all. He thought that with his status as a doctor, Jack wouldn't dare to do any harm to him. Furthermore, just from the treatment that he had received, he felt that it was just a simple interrogation. The moment that he finished speaking, he felt something big and hard smash onto his face. He was forced to fall down as even the couch that he was sitting on was flipped over due to the power that was contained in the punch. Doctor got onto his feet as he screamed in pain. He held his broken nose that was already bleeding non-stop. You don't care? You have seen many deaths, right? Perhaps you have caused even more? But one mistake that you did was to cheat and make my mother die. Jack roared in anger. That was the best hospital in the city. We were brought to you because of your arrangements. If even the best hospital couldn't find a problem with my mother, did you expect that we would actually go to the small hospitals to look around? At that time, my mother's body was already weak and she couldn't move around a lot. If you had no intention of taking care of her medication, you could have as well let another doctor handle it. Yet, you took it and you tell me that you don't care? Just wait and see how I deal with you. Jack continued speaking before he rushed towards the doctor who had just gotten to his feet and began pummeling him. Just wait and see how I deal with you. Jack continued speaking before he rushed towards the doctor who had just gotten to his feet and began pummeling him. What are you doing? I'm a doctor. The doctor was so terrified that he hurriedly shouted at Jack, hoping that Jack would stop beating him. This was completely out of his expectation. He hadn't thought that he would actually suffer a beating in Jack's hands. Before the doctor could get away, another punch landed on him. At the same time, Jack shouted, You still King dare to call yourself a doctor? Do you think you deserve that title? I'm going to make sure that you pay for what you have done. As he said these words, he kept on punching and kicking the doctor. But all the same, he made sure that his punches and kicks weren't that heavy to avoid killing him. What Jack wanted for now was the doctor to suffer great physical pain. Then, he would make sure that his life as a doctor would end. The reason as to why he was so lenient was simply because he wasn't the one that had actually planned to kill his mother. But he was still involved. And the punishment for that wasn't as simple as beating him up. It had to be more than that. The cries of the doctor made those guys who were guarding the place to shiver. They couldn't imagine what was happening to that poor doctor for him to scream the way that he was at that time. Jack cared not about the cries of the doctor. He beat him up till he fainted. But still, he continued beating him up till he was woken up by the intense pain that he was feeling. In this way, for more than 30 minutes, the doctor experienced the cycle of fainting from pain only to be woken up by the intense pain. It was only after seeing that the doctor was about to break down that Jack stopped. He didn't want this guy to turn into a vegetable. Otherwise, how was he going to have mental torture next? Looking at the doctor who was no longer recognizable due to the beating, Jack nodded in satisfaction as he felt that the anger that he had accumulated in his heart for some time now had been partly vented. But it was only appeased for the time being. There was still a lot that he would have to do to make sure that the anger in his heart actually subsided. Taking his handkerchief, Jack wiped off the blood on his hands. Then, he called for the group outside to come and take the guy out. He instructed them to throw him where someone could find him. He still planned to do more than just beating him up. And for the next part of the punishment, Jack had to release him so that he could be treated. Jack then left the warehouse and went back to the palace. Making sure that nobody saw him, Jack managed to enter his room and took a shower before changing the clothes that were already stained with the doctor's blood. After that, he asked Denali to look into the dirt that the doctor had accumulated over the years that he had been working. And if it wasn't enough, she had to find ways to add more into it. He planned to make sure that the reputation that this guy had built over the years was completely trampled. In this way, he would then make sure that he was sent to prison. He had to be sentenced for a lifetime in prison. That was the reason as to why he had actually told Denali to increase the dirt on his name if possible. He didn't want to have this guy going to prison only for him to come out after a few years. He wanted him to die there. That was the least punishment that he had received. As for the one that had actually made his mother die, that person only deserved a single punishment from him: death. Crystal City, Alfonso family mansion. In a room, Brenda looked at her mother. Her mother had blonde hair that matched hers and brown eyes. She had a good figure showing that she was trying to maintain even though she was already so old and had 3 children. Mother, the doctor just got kidnapped today. I have tried using all the connections that we have in the family to look for him, but there are no traces of him. It's like he just disappeared. Brenda couldn't sit still at all. Now, she was anxious. She could still remember the time that Jack had told her that he would actually find out by himself. She had thought that it would be impossible, but all the same, she had decided to take action and hide all the evidence that could be hidden. She was just about to meet the doctor today when she suddenly got the news that he had disappeared. She had mobilized a lot of the family's resources and connections to try and find him, but in the end, she couldn't even find a single trace of him. This was Crystal City, where the real power of the Alfonso family was. But surprisingly, they couldn't find a single thing about him. That implied that the one that had taken him away was someone who had planned things well. She just couldn't imagine that Jack could actually capture the doctor that easily. Furthermore, for him to actually know that the doctor was involved, it meant that he had gotten a clue that his mother's death was related to him. Now, she wondered if she shouldn't have actually tried to send someone after him. After all, Jack only came looking for her after the assassination attempt failed. And from then, the doctor disappeared. Have you used all the available resources to find him? There's nowhere in Crystal City that he can hide. Marion frowned as she asked Brenda. I have done everything possible. There's nothing that I have spared. All the favors that I was owed during the past few years, I have actually used them to try and find the information about him. In the end, there's nothing that can be found, Brenda said. Marion failed to believe that they actually couldn't find any information about someone who was popular in the city. She took out her phone and made a call. Yes, can you find information about someone? She said to the other person on the other side of the phone. She went ahead to tell that person all the information that she had on the doctor. After an hour, the person called.
I'm sorry,
but the person that you are looking for cannot be found, whether it's in the CCTV footages of the city or being seen by others. In other words, the person disappeared early this morning. The strange thing is that not even his family know where he went, and he hasn't been seen leaving the city either. After that, the other party ended the call. Marion was left standing in place, not sure on what to do. She couldn't believe that even the best information broker in the city couldn't find him. This is a little strange. Could it be related to Jack really? As long as I can remember, Jack wasn't someone with any strength or support. Marion muttered. Mom, what are we supposed to do now? If this is Jack who has actually gotten his hands on the doctor, it means that he will know that we are actually involved in his mother's death. What do we do? Brenda asked. This was actually the first time that she was this anxious about something. She was already used to being able to do anything and finding what she wanted. For her to suddenly be rendered powerless, this feeling was so strange to her, and she definitely couldn't accept it. What nonsense are you spouting? You were so young back then. You only listened from the sides. So, this matter doesn't really concern you at all. You shouldn't worry about it. I will handle the situation in my own way. I won't believe that a small kid can beat me. Marion looked at Brenda as she spoke. But Mom, Brenda wanted to refute, but she was cut off by her mother's stern gaze. Go and relax. Leave this matter to me, Marion said. Although she wanted to say more, Brenda was forced to shut up because this was one of the rare times that she had seen her mother this serious. And every time that she was this way, she would always make final decisions that no matter what she did or said couldn't be changed. Seeing her daughter leaving, Marion took a deep breath as she tried to think of what she was supposed to do next. In the end, she decided to sleep and let her mind rest. Only then could she begin thinking. She slept for about 3 hours. And later on, when she woke up, she began thinking again. Finally, she got an idea and decided to call Brenda to ask her. In the end, no matter how she called, she found that Brenda's phone was switched off. She decided to go and get her by herself. But before she could take a few steps towards the door, she received a text message from a stranger. Come and get her at the forest 2 miles from the Alfonso family. Make sure to come alone or she's dead." Marion's heart skipped a beat. She tried calling the other number, but she found that the number had already placed her on the blacklist, and she couldn't contact the other party at all. Knowing the seriousness of the matter, Marion rushed out of the mansion. She ignored the strange gazes that she was receiving and got into her car before driving away at a high speed. Brenda was her last born, and there was no way that she was going to allow someone to hurt her. She had always doted on the girl because the girl had the same character as herself. So, she loved her the most of all her 3 children. Not long after, she arrived at the forest that she had been told to come to. She had rushed on the road and ignored the traffic lights. Luckily, there was no traffic police that pursued her. Just as she was wondering on where to go, she received another text from the very same number. "Just head towards the center of the forest." Brenda POV. After leaving my mother's room, I left the family mansion. Although my mother had stated that I had to leave the matter to her, there was no way that I was going to do that. I could tell that all of this was started by me. It was just like a butterfly effect. From the moment that I had decided to have my half-brother Jack killed, so that I could hide my mother's involvement in the death of his mother, he must have been taking action in the dark. Of course, it wasn't that I was sure about it before. Back then, I had simply thought that his words were a joke and that there was no way that he could find out that we wanted to kill him because we didn't want to have him knowing that we were involved in his mother's death. It wasn't something simple once Jack knew about the cause of his mother's death. My father actually didn't know the reason of her death. And although he usually ignored her, he had always felt guilty about not marrying her. So, he had made sure to warn my mother and my other stepmother that they were not supposed to plan anything that would lead to her death. Although they were allowed to mess with her for simple things, anything that was related to her life was prohibited. My mother agreed to it. But we had no choice back then but to make sure that she died. In the first place, my mother never liked her, and that hatred for her was transferred to me. So, when my mother had the plan to kill her, I was involved. Although I wasn't involved in the issue concerning the process of how she was going to be killed, I was the one that made sure that my father never found that she was suffering at that time. That's right, we were sure that if my father found out that we were planning to kill her, we would have to face his anger. In the end, I managed to cut off all the means that Jack's mother had tried using to get my father's attention. Even Jack was stopped by me from reaching father by lying that he was busy or that he had left the mansion. And so, Jack's mother died 2 months later. I'm not even sure what mother did because no matter how someone looked at Jack's mother, they would find that she had simply died of a natural death. Even when father tried investigating the cause of her death, he found that it was natural. And so, he didn't blame anyone, and at the end of it, he had ended up completely forgetting about her. As I walked out of the family mansion, I was trying to think of a way that would help mother. Since I was the real cause of the chain reaction and Jack's suspicion, I had to find a way to solve it. It would be good if I could actually kill him off. With him no longer being in Crystal City and the world, I was sure that it wouldn't be a problem to finish him off without leaving behind clues. The reason as to why he found me the last time was simply because the assassin that mother had called over was so weak in that he couldn't even kill Jack. I got into my car and drove towards the outskirts of the city. I planned to leave the city and head to Volant City. If I could meet with Jack and kill him, then I wouldn't have the trouble of thinking about how to prevent my father from finding out about Jack's mother's death. I had already gotten far from the city when suddenly, a Range Rover blocked my path. This place was quite desolate, and there were fewer cars. The reason for this was because this road was longer, and there was another one that was short that led to Volant City. I had decided to use this road because I knew that my mind was a mess and I wasn't going to drive well on a busy road. I was forced to press the emergency brakes to avoid colliding with the Range Rover. After that, I got out of the car and looked at the car that was in front of me and shouted in anger, "What are you doing? Do you know that this is a road? You are going to cause an accident here." Just as I finished speaking, I saw the headlights of the car being lit. And what followed that was that the Range Rover rushed towards me. I was so scared. The way that the Range Rover was coming my way, I knew that it wouldn't stop. Perhaps the driver had been angered by my words? But that's not a good reason for the driver to try killing me, right? With my thoughts still chaotic, I still managed to jump to the side and barely managed to evade being hit by the car. I looked at the car that had suddenly stopped. I was just about to get onto my feet when suddenly, The doors of the Range Rover opened and 3 bulky men got out of it. Their body statures were terrifying. Although they were wearing suits, it didn't remove the hooligan vibe that was being emitted by their bodies at all. I was already scared. Now that I could see these bulky men approaching me, the fear in my heart intensified. What are you trying to do? I tried to question them. The courage that I had when I faced Jack's cold eyes back then had already disappeared. There, at least I knew that we were in a resort, and there was no way that Jack would actually try attacking me. But here, we were so far from other people. If these guys actually had the intention of killing me, I won't be saved unless another person decided to use this road. Gathering all the strength in my body, I got up from the ground and ignored the pain that came from the bruises that I had received from jumping and tried running away. Had I been closer to my car, I would have gone into it. But there were the bulky guys between me and my cars. So, the only thing I could do was to run towards the forest at the side of the road. But the 3 men ran after me, and the dress that I was wearing didn't support me running. So, they easily caught up to me. Leave me alone. Help. I tried using all the strength in my body to break free from their grasps, but I couldn't. It was also at this point that I suddenly got hit and everything went black. I'm not sure how long passed when I was unconscious, but I was woken up by the cold water that was poured onto my body. The water made me jump onto my feet. I looked around with fear in my eyes. Then, I saw that I was actually inside something like a building. The walls were made of wood. As I looked around, my gaze finally landed on someone who was seated on a chair looking at me amusedly.
Yeah.
Jack, what are you trying to do? I asked as I looked at him. Behind him, there were the 3 people that had knocked me out and brought me here. Haha, there it goes again. You also think that I'm Jack. You should be the one that sent that guy called Viper after Jack, right? The young man asked. His words confused me. Why was he talking from a different perspective? And why was he asking about something that he already knows about? Still, just to make sure, I spoke again. Jack, stop messing around and let me go. In front of the 3 guys, I was extremely afraid. But in front of Jack, at least I had a little bit of courage to berate him. Young lady, you are mistaking me for someone else. Actually, I'm not Jack. I'm Jonathan, Jack's cousin. As for Jack, he should be here soon. The young man smiled and spoke. Cousin? Jack has a cousin? I asked doubtfully. How is this possible? I knew Jack all too well. How could he have a cousin? Furthermore, why would a cousin look exactly like him? This was impossible, right? Yeah, that guy that you sent was so dumb. I told him that I wasn't Jack. In the end, he actually thought that I was lying. So, he attacked me and ended up dead. But I have to thank you for sending that guy to kill Jack. After all, had it not been for that attack, I wouldn't have met my cousin this soon. Jonathan spoke again. I was still confused about what he is talking about. But at this time, I suddenly heard the sound of footsteps heading towards the door. I looked towards it, wondering who it was that was coming. No need to be so nervous. That should be Jack. The moment that Jonathan finished speaking, I saw a person that looked just like him coming in. The moment that I looked into his eyes, I finally believed what I was told. The coldness in his eyes was the same as the one that he had shown back then when he came to my room in the resort. Jack, there are 2 of you? Author's POV. Jack had already gotten back to Crystal City. This was the first time that he had actually come back to this place since he left during the previous month. In any case, he was here to make sure that those that were involved in his mother's death were all punished. In his mind at that moment, a blood debt had to be paid by another. His mother was the most precious person in his heart, and she was simply killed off. There was no way that he was going to let the murderers off the hook. He had already asked Jonathan for help again. Jonathan had accepted because this matter concerned the death of his aunt. And of course, he too was so angry about it. But he was good at hiding things from the others. When he got into the forest that Jonathan had informed him to come to, Jack found that there was a wooden house built here. The house was located in the middle of the forest. He arrived in front of the door, and he could already hear the conversation between Jonathan and Brenda. Without wasting time, he pushed the door open and entered. Just after he entered, his gaze landed on Brenda, who was looking at him. Jack, there are 2 of you, she asked with disbelief clear in her eyes. Jack gave her a cold gaze before he focused on Jonathan. I have already informed her. She should be here in a few minutes. Jonathan nodded and looked at two of the guys behind him. You two can go and bring her over. Yes, boss. The two nodded before they left. Jack, on the other hand, looked at Brenda and spoke. You refused to tell me the reason as to why you wanted to kill me. I did my own research and found the reason. Tell me, is it just because you don't want to have someone dangerous as me? After all, after I know that you guys actually were involved in the death of my mother, it will be troublesome, right? Brenda, who was still surprised, looked at Jack again. This time, she could see that the coldness within his eyes had grown further as there was a hint of killing intent that was surrounding him as he gazed at her. And as he said these words, she knew that the cat was already out of the basket and there was nothing to hide. So, she looked at Jack fiercely and said, So what if you know? The reason as to why we killed your mother is something that you can't even understand. You think that just because you have found a cousin who can back you up, you can do whatever you want? You're so naive. Hee hee, you are so funny. You actually think that Jack is depending on me? I'm currently in my weakest state, and he's the one that's helping me out. After all, if it wasn't for him, I wouldn't have had the guts to make big moves openly. Jonathan snickered as he spoke. Brenda couldn't understand the situation at all. She had thought that Jack was depending on his cousin so that he could get the information and have her kidnapped. In the end, it was actually the opposite. So what if he's a little bit wealthy? Do you think that you can compete with the one that asked my mother to kill that B****? Brenda still didn't believe that there was anything that they could do. Before she could even realize it, a slap landed on her left cheek. The power of the slap was so huge that it made her cheek immediately swell as she fell onto the ground. She held her cheek as her eyes turned red. She really wanted to cry now from the pain. But she would never allow Jack to see her crying. You dare call my mother AB*** once again, and I'll make sure that you'll suffer more than just a slap, Jack said coldly before he went back and took a seat, waiting for Marion to arrive. At this point, fear had already been introduced in Brenda's heart. For the first time, she had experienced the side of Jack that she had never seen. The side that made him easily beat her without considering that she was actually older than him. Well, what are you waiting for? If you are intent on doing something, then do it already. I'm not ready to continue sitting here doing nothing, Brenda said. Do you have a choice? No longer smiling, Jonathan asked coldly. Although he was good at hiding his emotions, there were situations that even he himself would have to show it. He was now angry that someone actually dared to call his aunt AB***. Considering that the two of them were twins, didn't that mean that his mother Anita was also AB***? Seeing that there was nothing that she could do, Brenda could only continue sitting on the floor waiting. She wasn't sure who it was that they were waiting for. But all the same, she decided to be patient, waiting and hoping that her mother would notice that she was missing. After about 10 minutes, there was a sound of footsteps from outside. And not long after, the two big guys came in following behind Marion. When Marion saw her daughter whose cheek was already swollen, she cried in surprise and anger before running forward and hugged her. Are you okay? Who is it that dared to hit you? Tell Mommy. Marion began asking. Mom, what are you doing here? Brenda looked at her mother in disbelief. She wasn't expecting that her mother would be here so soon. Then, she thought about how Jack said that a lady would be here soon. Could it be that he was talking about her mother? Brenda's heart tensed. If it was true that he was talking about her mother, then it would be troublesome. Jack would definitely not do something stupid. He must be planning something. Ignoring her daughter's question, Marion finally noticed that there was actually another person in the room. In fact, there were more than two people. She turned towards them, and her pupils constricted. She stared at the cousins and asked, Jack, there are two of you? Never expected that when you actually killed my aunt, right? Jonathan asked. Aunt? And was your aunt? Marion looked at Jonathan incredulously. She was just like Brenda, not understanding why Jack had a cousin who looked just like him. His mother and mine were twins. I was excited that I could finally meet my aunt. In the end, you actually dared to kill her. Don't you have guts, woman? Jonathan spoke coldly. Twins? Anyway, it doesn't matter who you are. For daring to beat up my daughter like this, You should be ready to pay the price. The one that had made me kill your mother or aunt is someone that you can't offend. Marion spoke coldly. Could that person be the owner of that number? Jack threw over the phone that showed a mobile phone number. Looking at the familiar number, Marion felt her heart tremble. She could still remember this person. He was the one that had told her that if she didn't do as he wanted, he would destroy the Alfonso family. And to prove that, he had actually made most of the businesses that the Alfonso family depended on to be suspended. Not willing to have her family destroyed, she made a decision to kill Anne. She never liked that woman to begin with. So, when she was given the opportunity to kill her, she took it. How did you get this number? She asked in disbelief. That's my second uncle. Now that's confirmed. I really want to kill that idiot. Not only has he been trying so hard to send assassins after me just so that his son can take the position of the family head, he actually dared to have his sister killed. Jonathan was so furious that he got to his feet. Hearing his words, Brenda and Marion's minds blanked out. Uncle? Sister? Did that mean that Anne was actually part of a family that was far bigger than theirs? And they had just killed her. If the members of the family knew about that, wouldn't their Alfonso family suffer a cruel fate? That guy. It seems that he planned everything in advance. Although he was the one that had her killed, he wasn't the one that did it directly. Instead, he pushed the blame on another person. Jack stated. In this way, if grandfather investigates this, he wouldn't think that he was the one that had actually killed her. Jonathan added, since you dared to kill my mother, you should have long prepared to face the same fate. Jack stated coldly as he stared at the mother-daughter pair. He had investigated things clearly and found that it was just the mother-daughter pair that were involved with his mother's death. The reason of having these two to come here was just to confirm that his second uncle was involved before he killed them off. He had already sentenced them to death the moment that he confirmed that they were the ones that had actually killed her. There was nothing like he was going to spare them just because they had some kind of relationship. Jack's words made Marion and Brenda look at him in disbelief. You can't kill me. I may not be your real mother, but I'm your stepmother. Marion tried finding a way out. She knew that if Jack didn't let them leave here, there was nothing that they could do. After all, there were actually 5 men here, and the 2 of them were only women. Do you think you deserve to call yourself with the same title as my mother? Had you thought of this before you killed her, it would have been better. But you already killed her, and you are trying to tell me that you can be called a mother to me? You don't deserve it. As he spoke, Jack began approaching the 2. Even if his hands would be stained by blood, as long as it was the blood of those that were involved in taking or threatening the life of his loved ones, he wouldn't mind at all. Seeing Jack approaching them, the 2 women were scared. Knowing again that since she was the one that had killed Anne, and Jack was angry about that, and he would definitely not let her go free, Marion decided to look for a chance for her daughter. Jack, I'm the one that killed your mother. Brenda wasn't involved in all of this. Please, you can take my life, but please let her go. Marion tried begging. Mom. Brenda was shedding tears. She wanted to persuade her mother, but Marion didn't listen to her. Shut up already. Marion shouted. You think that because you will say a few words I will let her go? Not only had she cooperated with you, she had only recently wanted to have me killed. So, why should I let someone who wanted to take my life go? Jack sneered. Marion was just about to say more when Jack moved. Before she even realized it, Jack was already holding Brenda by her neck. Brenda was now hanging in the air. Her throat had been tightly grabbed, completely denying her air. Her legs were kicking in the air fiercely. Marion paled when she saw this scene. She got onto her feet and rushed towards Jack as she began hitting him so that he could release Brenda. But her efforts were all in vain. She wasn't allowed to continue as Jonathan came forward and pushed her aside. Since it was just me that she was involved in the real killing issue, I will grant her a quick death. The moment that he finished speaking, Jack increased the strength of his grasp and completely crashed Brenda's neck. Thud. Without reservations, he dropped her body on the ground. He gazed at Marion, who was already wailing from the pain of seeing her beloved daughter being killed. She was almost going mad at this moment as she jumped up and down, trying to get past Jonathan and reach Jack. As for you, other than death, you will have to experience the pain of having someone that is dear to you being killed. You are lucky that she died with reason, unlike you who killed my mother who had done nothing wrong. Jack said. After that, he held the already deranged Marion and broke her neck as well. Although he would have wanted to torture the two women, he felt that it would completely make him so cold-blooded. But there was definitely a person that wouldn't be able to escape that fate. That person was the one that had asked others to have his mother killed. Jack would definitely not mind having him tortured to the death. Now that he was done with the two who had been the direct killers of his mother, he felt his heart was at peace. He felt that his mother's soul could at least calm down a little. But resting in peace, that would only happen when the last person was taken care of. That was something that Jack decided that he would have to do as soon as possible. He couldn't stand the feeling in his heart, the feeling of knowing that there was someone who had killed his mother. That person was enjoying his life normally. Jonathan felt that Jack wasn't in the best mood. He went forward and placed an arm around his shoulder before patting his back, trying to comfort him. At the same time, he gestured for the three guys to take care of the bodies. The three guys took action quickly and carried the two bodies away. As for Jack, he thought that now was the time to have the Alfonso family go bankrupt. Although it was true that Dalton hadn't been involved in killing his mother, it was also true that he had failed to protect her. He had actually taken her with him. She had sacrificed a lot just for him to ignore her. And as his mother died, she must have died with a lot of regret and resentment. But, not wanting her son to have an even more difficult life, she didn't tell him about it. Now, even if his mother hadn't told him to hate them, he still did. At the end of the day, they never treated him properly. Considering that they had bullied him and his mother, that was enough for him to make them experience despair. To make them know what it felt like to be looked down upon. The Alfonso family already had a lot of enemies. But due to the strength of the Alfonso family, they dared not to show themselves in the light. But once they were given a chance, they would make the best of it. Thinking of this, Jack decided that they would take action. So, after a while, the two left the wooden house. This was the place that Jonathan was staying when he was in Crystal City. At this time, there were already several pieces of news that were trending on the internet and other social media platforms. All of this news had the same topic. Although the titles were different, they all spoke of the same thing. A doctor or a murderer, or R. Did the doctor really take an oath? The doctor's selfish path. Several headlines talked about the same thing. A doctor who no longer had the morals of a doctor. Using his position as a doctor to gain benefits. He had killed several people. Using his connections with the Alfonso family, he had actually managed to evade all those victims that had suffered under his hands. The image of the doctor who was in charge of Jack's mother in the hospital was posted there. What's more, the audio of him saying that he didn't care if a person died as he had seen many deaths occurring had been added. This piece of news immediately infuriated the netizens. None of them dared to actually take his side. Instead, there were many people who wanted to see him dead. And one after the other, victims who had suffered due to the doctor emerged one after the other. The internet boiled with comments of the angry netizens as they heard the words of those that claimed to have been sexually harassed, extorted, and so on. The Alfonso family was not left behind. There was a transaction statement that showed that it was true that Marion had transferred $30,000 to the doctor. This was counted as her supporting him. Although it was true that Marion had cooperated with the doctor to have him lie about the results of the test of Jack's mother, the Alfonso family had no other relationship with the doctor. Instead, this was just one of the means that Jack had utilized to start dealing a blow to the Alfonso family. He would begin by having their reputation smeared with mud. All the same, it was also true that the Alfonso family wasn't clean. So, one by one, several cases of them evading tax, selling defective products and so on began emerging. It was a storm on the internet as one by one. The enemies that the Alfonso family had been nurturing throughout all these years began emerging one after the other. They were the ones that were adding fuel to the fire that Denali had already set up. This was what Jack had meant when he said that if it wasn't enough, she had to add more to make sure that it was. So, the issue of the doctor cooperating with the Alfonso family as well as some cases such as sexual harassment were added from nowhere. The victims were all created by Denali. So, this made the doctor's image plummet at a faster speed. Of course, Denali didn't simply put this evidence stupidly. She had made enough preparations to make sure that no matter how the police looked into it, they would find that it was true. One of the methods that she used was to find those people who had really experienced sexual harassment. Then, in return for claiming that it was the doctor who had done it, Denali would help them solve the real culprit of their harassment. Added with the compensation that they received from Denali, cash of course, these people easily agreed to this. At this moment, inside a hospital in Kuwait City, the doctor had just opened his eyes after losing his consciousness for several hours due to the beating that he had received from Jack. He was currently inside a private ward. He was recognized by someone who knew his identity, and that was the reason as to why he was here. In this ward, there happened to be a TV. It was just that the TV was currently in the silent mode, giving no sound. Doctor just happened to open his eyes. When he turned to the side with great difficulty, he saw the news that made his eyes bulge in their sockets. Although the sound wasn't there, the headlines of the breaking news was enough to inform him of what was happening. What the heck? Since when did I start harassing people sexually? I extorted someone? How am I extorting others here? This is framing. Someone is framing me. He cried in his mind in disbelief. His mouth was sealed, so he couldn't speak. He was just shouting when suddenly, a group of 4 police officers accompanied by a doctor and a nurse came into the room. Where's the wounded doctor? One of the police officers asked as he looked around. No matter how he looked, he could only see a bed and there was nobody there. He's the one there. The nurse pointed at the bed. It was only then that the police actually noticed that the white on the bed was a person and not the bedsheets. He could finally see the little slits that revealed a pair of reddened eyes. That's a person? Another officer asked in disbelief. Yeah, he's the one. He was beaten and that his whole body had wounds of several degrees. We had no other choice but to put bandages all over his body. The doctor explained. Even the mouth? An officer asked. Yes, not only did he lose a lot of teeth, but even his lips had been burst. It just like this guy had gone somewhere to be beaten up by a gang of people. Even bees don't bite people in such a manner. The doctor continued to explain. Then, an officer in the group looked at the TV and happened to see the news. He looked at the TV before looking at the mummy on the bed. He looked at the 2 sides for a while before he got to get the remote. What are you doing? The officer in charge of the case asked his partner. I want to hear the news. The officer replied. Don't you know that this is a patient's ward? The officer asked again, not paying attention to the TV at all. If it was wrong to have the TV audio, then the hospital shouldn't have placed one here. The guy replied. Before the in charge could react, the other officer had already unmuted the audio. She died? Anyway, it doesn't concern me. I have seen many people dying. So, the death of your mother doesn't have anything to do with me, and I don't care whether she died or she's alive. It just so happened that when he unmuted, the audio that played was the record of the piece that Denali had selected from the conversation between Jack and the doctor. And that was a recorded statement from one of the victims of the doctor's cruelty. As you have all heard, he's a doctor, but he doesn't care about the life or death of his patients. What's this? This is irresponsibility and inhumanity in a doctor. Tune in for more news as we are still looking for them for you. That was a reporter giving the report. There was deathly silence in the ward as the officers, the doctor, and the nurse all looked at the mummy in disbelief. They could see the face, and they could see the name on the screen. So, they could tell that the person being talked about was the one in there. Doctor, on the other hand, wanted to vomit blood. You only recorded that part? Where's the part where you beat me up? This is scam. He roared in his mind.